Hello there. Welcome to the case wrap-up for episode 5, Interrogation. During this episode, it's pretty much I would say 75% of it takes place right after a polygraph test was performed by uh, a man by the name of Goldstein, who we'll get to in a little bit. But it's mostly just Kirk talking to Kevin Mailer about what happened during the polygraph test. He asked some questions pretty much about Jennifer. He asks him about faith. He asks him about, is he a white supremacist? He goes all over the place. This was by far, or I don't want to say by far, but this was, I think, the best episode yet because it's just pure, unfiltered Kevin. You don't get you get a first-hand account here of when he's talking. It's no longer Kirk telling you, we know this for a fact because Kevin said this. This is a full-on. You get to go a deep dive into the madness of Kevin Boston Mailer, and it truly is. I mean, the man, he came out looking so bad with all these cases. I'm even starting to think that those cases that even Kirk said we have no proof of him shooting a girl in the face with a shotgun. My thought is, well, he probably did that too because I mean, Jesus Christ, he's so guilty of obviously of these other things. So
this was also my favorite episode. I've seen a lot of comments on Twitter. This is my favorite episode. So
yes,
I think that's in agreement. If anyone is watching this and they haven't watched and they haven't listened, please go listen to this episode. It's that good. And it's not just unfiltered Kevin. It's also we get Kirk.
Yeah, we get the Kirk Minahan show fans get Kirk. The Kirk we know and love. Where he's just like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, that's bullshit. He's talking about at one point he talks to Kevin. He's like, you got to have her clean up her yard because apparently his girlfriend Keisha had a disgusting yard, and he was like, oh, it was much cleaner when I was living there. And I mean,
he had it looking nice.
Everyone knows I'm a big fan of yard work and things like that, so I could appreciate Kirk throwing in that comment there. But so it starts off with so Kirk apparently paid this man Goldstein to conduct a polygraph test, and paid him $950, I believe he said at one point. And so Kevin agreed to it. He said, of course, but he said the only agreement is that they go over everything during this this polygraph test. They're going to talk about Jennifer. They're going to talk about Faith. They're going to talk about April. They're going to talk about Kevin. They're going to talk about everything to get everything out there.
And that's not what Kirk wanted. That's what Kevin wanted.
Yes, exactly. That's what Kevin wanted, because he said he was bragging on Facebook about how this was going to exonerate him, how he was going to, like, everyone who ever thought he was guilty is going to look like such a moron after all this. And it turns out he ends up falling asleep 3 times during the polygraph test, which I don't understand. He said the reason why he fell during the interview afterwards. He said the reason why he fell asleep was because he felt so comfortable. Was because he was in such a comforting place, and that he knew he wasn't in danger when he was taking the polygraph test. So he dozed off 3 times.
He had his shoes off. He's gonna fall asleep.
And then afterwards, and then after the fact, he said on Facebook, he said that Goldstein was trying to make him fall asleep, which would be very, very strange if that was the case. He said he had to take his shoes off, which I guess makes you, a little bit more comfortable. I know from The Wolf of Wall Street, actually, is how I know this, but like that, how people can, cheat a polygraph test by placing something in their foot. So he has its procedure, takes his shoes off. He said he was whispering to him, which he said he was not whispering to, but he was just not yelling. He was just kind of talking to him. I mean, I've had like hearing tests done before, and people were just kind of talk to you. It's not like they're not trying to lull you to sleep by asking you questions about a possible murder in 1989. And the third thing was he said he was in a soundproof room, so everything was extremely quiet, which turns out to be 100% false. So,
Which was clear. There was music playing in the background in the lobby. You could
yes,
hear that even on the
yes.
recording.
I mean, so my biggest takeaway from this, before we like break down into the the chunks of the interview, my biggest takeaway is Kevin is just he's lying about everything and anything. There's nothing he says in which you can believe him. He keeps going back to the same trope of, oh, I'm a protector. He thinks he's some sort of Batman of Walhalla, where all these girls go to become protected by. At one point, he points out to Kirk, he's like, oh, check out this 19-year-old girl. She thinks I'm great. There's no possible way I could ever hurt someone like Faith or Jennifer, because look at this girl, which is just, that doesn't correlate. And also, I would say 19-year-old girls, especially if they're under the influence of drugs, could be very well manipulated or groomed by older men in order to think a certain way. And it sounds like Kevin is, I mean, he said he got a 15-year-old pregnant. So it definitely sounds like, to me, like this is a case of that happening. I don't believe they said her name, but she was a 19-year-old. So
the one thing about Kevin, he loves to lie, but his lies, he's consistent with his stories. He tells the same ones over and over.
He is. I think that's a testament to how hard he's trying to fight this, but some of his lies just aren't, but like they're just not in reality. I believe one point he said ever since Kirk got involved, he's been getting shot at left and right. Which, if he is, he needs to go to the police. Like, I know he said he's not a rat, which just seems to be like an excuse for anything. It was like, well, Kevin, if this is happening, why don't you go to the police? It's like, I'm not a rat. Well, no matter what you are, if you're being shot at by someone obviously with the intent to kill you, it's either you're going to be a rat or you're going to end up dead. So you need to pick one. So, but I don't believe that he's been shot at, or I think he's talking about the harassment he's talking about might have to do more with social media, with some people, commenting on his post, commenting on his pictures, saying that, accusing him of doing certain things. That I would believe happened, but I do not think he's ever been physically shot at or assaulted recently because of Kirk Minahan. I don't know if you.
I would say, based on what he does, like that would, I feel like if you're drug dealing, I mean, I guess that's dangerous business. I don't think it's because of the podcast that you're getting shot at.
Yeah, that's another good point. I mean, he could be getting shot at for a million other reasons. Like I said, he's not an insurance salesman or something of that nature. So let's also get this out of the way too. On a scale of 1 to 10, how annoying is Goldstein?
I'll give him a 7.
I was going to give him a 7 too.
I think a lot of it was cut out. Because we heard on Kirk Minahan show there was a what played from Goldstein.
Yep.
That wasn't in the actual case episode.
Yes.
So I think Kirk and Steve would give him a higher grade.
Yes, I do agree. I do think it was interesting at one point. Kirk's talking to him. Kirk's doing his Kirk Minahan thing where he's building up to something. He's talking. He said he's like, what's with the like white power posts and the white supremacy stuff? And he's like, I don't think I'm not a racist or anything. I don't think there's one race that is better than another. He's like, I just think that the integrity of the races should remain. And Kirk goes, what does that mean? And Goldstein instantly jumps in. He's like, well, it's pretty obvious. I mean, he wants white people to be with white people and black people to be with black people. And Kirk 100% would have said, if this was a interview on the Kirk Minahan show with Blind Mike or something, and Mike comes in with something out of the blue, he would have said, shut up, stupid. And then he just would have went back to, but I think he was trying to keep it a little bit more professional. And the one thing we don't hear, I think as the episode goes on, we hear less and less of Goldstein. And I think that might be because at one point Kirk was like, hey, like, I'm trying to do my thing. I appreciate the help and everything like that, but it's not necessarily, we're not partners in this. So I found him to be annoying. I could also see him trying to like make up for, he feels bad that he wasn't able to
Oh,
conduct an
yeah,
actual
definitely.
polygraph. So he's like, I'm taking this guy's money. I wasn't able to do what was promised. It wasn't because of him, it was because of Kevin.
Mhm.
And he's maybe perhaps he was trying to like make up for it, being like, hey, look, I'm going to try to help you solve this, or talk to this guy a little bit. But it just looks like Kirk just
He
wasn't.
wasn't malicious at all. He was
No,
just
no,
he was
no,
just
no.
there.
He was trying his best, and in
Yeah.
his head he was doing the right thing. So
Yeah.
I mean, and that's all that counts. So let's get into why we think Kevin fell asleep. Kirk says he believes that Kevin took heroin to fall asleep.
Mhm.
I am, uh, based off of the episode and what I heard, I am inclined to believe him on that, because I can only think of you if you were getting polygraphed, especially for something that has happened 30 years ago, and people have been putting your name towards it, and you keep saying you can't wait to be exonerated.
Mhm.
How is it even a possibility of you falling asleep? It's one thing if he has like narcolepsy or something, or some sort of disease where like he just randomly falls asleep. That's not the case. That's never been proven.
Mhm.
He said he was taking meth, or he smoked meth 10 hours before. I know that on meth you don't really sleep, so I think
Yeah.
I don't know if he thought he was crashing, he was coming down from it. He said he had a monstrous 70-minute sex capade when he woke up that morning. So I mean, I'm sure he said that in order to try to give the impression, oh man, I'm tired, dude. I've been. It's like it's like back in high school when your friend's lying. He just went and made out with his girlfriend. He's like, yeah, dude, we just had sex for 70 minutes. I'm so tired. But it's there's just lie after lie after lie, and at one point I think Kevin's like, Kirk, listen, I understand you're disappointed. I'm even more disappointed in myself. And it's like, no, you're not. Like stop saying that, because Kirk gave him every single. That's how you know when someone is lying, is when you keep giving them an avenue to go back. Kirk was like, that's fine. Like that's fine. We can do it another time. And he's like, oh man, I'll come up with the money. I'm sure I don't want you to pay for it. And Kirk's like, no, I don't care. I'll pay for another polygraph test
We'll,
tomorrow.
we'll we'll get to that. We'll get to that later on another
Yeah,
polygraph.
yeah,
But how he felt, I would think, yeah, Kirk is on the right track with the heroin.
mm-hmm.
In the 2010 interrogation, which the whole thing is on the case YouTube.
Yep.
You can find the link somewhere. There was something about a doctor's note that didn't allow him to take a
That
polygraph.
excused him. Yes.
Yeah. So
That.
he knew that there were ways around the polygraph already.
Mm-hmm.
So why not try something again?
I mean, I think the polygraph, what it measures is it measures like your mood, how you react to certain
Mhm.
things. So if he takes a mood altering drug, that's obviously going to give a different reaction. So maybe perhaps he wasn't on heroin, perhaps he took an opioid or some sort of
Mhm.
painkiller.
Mhm.
But I definitely think he was in some sort of uh not right mental state. Or maybe he's just so fucking into, not being caught with all this, he's able to just sleep. Like I don't know. I mean, I'm a fan of sleeping myself, but I could never
Yeah,
find,
sure.
I could never lull myself to sleep, especially if I'm being interviewed about the disappearance of two younger women and the death of two more people.
Mhm.
Uh, so I just think that's insane. And everything he said about that uh, was complete bullshit. At the end, he said he'll take his own polygraph test, I believe.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, he said he's talking to the Boston Globe and
yep.
other important people, and he is not happy with Kirk,
Mm-hmm.
and he will get a polygraph on his own and finally prove his innocence. Um, I don't know if he's actually talking to the Boston Globe or just someone that says they're from the Boston Globe.
Yep.
But if he is talking to the, like, I was thinking if he is actually talking to the Boston Globe and they're somehow getting in the way of Kirk giving him another polygraph,
Oh, I mean,
I
Jesus
mean,
Christ. Can you stoop to a lower? Like, we get it. Kirk doesn't like the Globe. The Globe doesn't like Kirk. But something tells me that if the whole spotlight investigation with the Catholic Church was going on and Kirk was in the same position with the Globe, he wouldn't, take the side of the
yeah.
priests or whatever like that. So if that is true, I mean, Jesus Christ, I mean, there's nothing the Globe will go to. As Kirk did say on the case, he said he hates the Globe hates him. But if they're willing to start taking the side of this fucking monster, that is not something I would throw out because I could see them doing it. But you just got to think to yourself, there's no way they would actually be doing
or
that.
not even taking the side of him, just like moving him away from Kirk doing it. Like don't like this, just telling him, oh, don't let Kirk do it, he's gonna screw you or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just absolutely incredible. But yeah, I mean, Kirk did say that during the interview, and if you watch the interview from 2010, he says he shopped around for doctors trying to look for, and this was kind of before like the whole opioid like crisis hit, where doctors are more reluctant to give out pain medication now. I'm sure he was able to get some sort of painkiller, some sort of opioid, and then go to another doctor and say, hey, listen, these people want me to take a polygraph test. I would love to take one, but I'm taking these pain pills for my back. So it's not, so anything that comes out of this would be thrown out in court in a second. So that's what I think happened. It is very strange. I do give him credit, I guess, like Kirk said, for showing up. I think Kirk said he thought beforehand he was going to have a 20% chance of him actually showing up. And he did show up. But, I mean, showing up really doesn't do anything if you don't show up mentally and you don't actually take place in the activity you were supposed to do. I do like how Kirk was like, well, you know how this is going to look to other people, right? And Kevin's like, well, that's what you're going to tell them. You're going to make me look like a bad guy. And he was like, no, I'm not going to tell them my opinion or anything. I'm just going to say, you agreed to a polygraph test. And during said polygraph test, you fell asleep. That's just what happened. That's just the facts.
Yeah. He said he's like, I'm going to go out there and they're going to think I'm a murderer. And Kirk says, is that, do they are they wrong to think that?
Well,
it's like you didn't prove your innocence. You didn't come here to do what you wanted to do.
I mean, if he took a polygraph test and everything came back that he actually never even met Jennifer, like he said, he never hung out with Faith, all these other things came back and it was true, that would certainly, I know polygraphs aren't 100% accurate, but I mean, that would certainly make things kind of push a little bit his way in terms of people who would be kind of on the fence, or that there's multiple theories out there. That would give him credence to say, hey, look, I took a polygraph test, I passed it, everything was above board. I sat down there for 3 hours and asked all these questions, and these were the results. He can't say that now. And I know Kirk has reached out to him and said, hey, you ready for another polygraph test? And now he's not going to take one. So I just think he's scared that Kirk now knows that Kevin knows how to get around taking a polygraph test. So if he does the same thing and he shows up and he falls asleep, Kirk's going to be like, okay, this is absolute bullshit. Like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Like, this is like how I like, there's no excuse for it if he ever did that again.
If they were gonna do it again, they'd have to somehow like get him a room in a hotel and just have him stay there, like, to make sure he doesn't take anything.
Yeah, kind of have him like under like lockdown or supervision. I mean, the best place to do it would honestly be like in a jail cell, because being looked at after, by police, making sure, because you can't just smoke meth while you're in jail. But there were a couple other things that Kevin lied about that were just weird. I know he said his wife died in the early 90s from breast cancer, which turns out a girl he was in a relationship with did end up dying. But then Kirk said he talked to this woman's family and he said that Kevin was not in her life at the point where she died, and they were never married.
Actually married. Yeah.
So
Very
that's very strange. Is he just lying to lie at this point? I don't know what he would exactly be covering up by saying like it was his wife. Perhaps he was trying to gain sympathy from Kirk. I know Kirk has, a history of cancer in his family. I don't know if Kevin knew about this and was trying to kind of tug at Kirk's heartstrings or anything like that. But it's because he did try to do that with the addiction side when they were talking about. He's like, listen, Kirk's like, so you told me you were clean when we got here. You sat in to do the polygraph test, and now you're telling me that you smoked meth at 1 a.m. He's like, well, yeah, but like I'm clean now, and I feel like smoking meth 10 hours ago means you're not clean. That just seems like within the window of saying you're still influenced by the drug. And
he said,
and then Kevin goes,
Goldstein was like, why did you, like, what made you take it? And he said, I'm an addict.
Yes.
Which made,
and he goes,
yeah, that makes sense.
And which is like a reasonable enough excuse or answer, but it just shows that, okay, well, you just lied to me an hour ago, so stop telling me that all you're telling me right now is the truth when you can't do the polygraph test. And we're just talking. So I thought that was just bizarre. The fact that Kevin was able to fall asleep 3 separate times, and the fact that the polygraph guy was like, yeah, it's happened before, but he's conducted thousands of polygraph tests, and he said it's happened a handful of times.
2 times.
Just shows that it's and I mean, I'm sure other people out there were taking polygraph tests who knew of, if you fall asleep it gets thrown out. So who knows? I mean, we'll just never know.
If you want to get into some of the other lies, he once again said that he didn't start doing any drugs until 2002, when his cousin, his story of his cousin accusing him or telling the police that he killed Jennifer Faye, which was we refuted that when Kirk talked to Kevin's brother in Walton, New York. Which I like. I like that portion when they went up there. That guy, he seems like a nice guy, Raymond.
Yes.
And he said that Kevin has been doing drugs basically his adult life, which we heard previously. He was doing cocaine in Brockton
with Jennifer, which he said he never did. And truthfully, the way I could tell that Raymond was a good witness, a good person to interview, is when they were talking with him, and he just goes, honestly, by now I thought my brother would have been dead. I think someone either would have killed him, or would have killed himself, or would have OD'd. Just like you can tell, not necessarily given up on him, but has come to terms with the lifestyle that his brother has chosen, and is like, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up dead. So the way he was talking about that was just crazy, especially when Boston was going off, and he's like, oh, I never roughed up any girls or anything like that. I'm always the one protecting them. And then at one point, Kirk was like, he said he never assaulted a woman. And then at one point, Kirk was like, okay, well, one of your ex-girlfriends said that you pushed her, and he was like, oh, I was on a new drug, and I simply picked her up and put her out of my way, which is just I don't see that being something that he necessarily.
That's another thing his brother talked about. He was an eyewitness to seeing. He said, I saw him get rough with a couple girls.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, you talk to really anyone, and they will say, other than this 19-year-old girl he's been talking to on Facebook, they'll say, I have seen him be rough with a girl. I'm not denying that Kevin has never been a nice person in his life, or maybe he beat up someone who was doing something wrong. I could definitely see that happening. But just because you go and you beat up someone who was raping a girl does not mean that you're not it's not possible for you to do similar things, or
Mhm.
to murder or to bury someone. And there were multiple people. Kirk says during this interview, when he came down to Walhalla and he was interviewing someone, someone said who, and she knew nothing about Jennifer Faye. She never heard of her, and she was like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
Kevin one time was bragging about how he buried a 16-year-old girl," which is just like, how? Why would you? Like, I've never buried a 16-year-old girl. I don't go around telling people I
Mhm.
buried a 16-year-old girl, because it wouldn't happen. And if you talk to anyone in my life, or anyone in your life, or pretty much anyone ever, they're not going to just randomly bring up, oh yeah, one time he was telling me he buried, who's bragging about a 16-year-old girl. He seems to think that the world is out to get him. I think he truly, in his mind, believes that all these people have, come together to, oh, we're just going to ruin
Mhm.
Kevin's life just because one time he went to the police and he said that his cousins were sexually abusing his children. So we're just going to accuse him of every single crime,
Mhm.
and
Well,
that's that.
Kirk mentioned that well, perhaps him bragging about burying a 16-year-old girl is just part of getting that kind of street cred. Um, he also talked about shooting a woman in the face, which Kirk
Mhm.
says probably didn't happen,
Yep.
but it's just a story told to make himself look, I don't know, more scary.
I mean, as a drug dealer, that's kind of like what you want. You kind of want, you don't
Mhm.
want to be, well, I guess you could kind of try to be a nice guy, but it seems like in the parts where, Kevin was around, you want to be seen as the tough guy, the guy who's, you don't fuck around with, especially when he's, dealing hardcore drugs
Mhm.
like meth, heroin, and everything like that. So there was an interesting interview near the end where we heard this brought up on the Kirk Minahan show before, when it was happening. Kirk was like,
Mhm.
"Is it wrong if you throw a guy a couple bucks in the canteen, in his canteen, in order to get him to do an interview with you? But what he's in jail for, is for some heinous shit." So his trailer mate, oh god, I forgot to write his
uh,
name down.
Barry Neal.
Yes, Barry Neal, is currently in jail for possession of, or child exploitation, or some sort of possession of
Mhm.
child pornography, which
Mhm.
obviously is just a heinous. It's one of the most disgusting charges anyone could ever be pressed on. Um, I think there's no way that if you're living in a trailer with someone and they have copious amounts of child porn, that you are not somehow also involved in said child porn. I definitely
Mhm.
think there is a connection there. I could definitely see, what's his name?
Barry Neal.
Barry Neal. I could definitely see Barry Neal kind of being upset with Kevin, that Barry kind of took the fall for this,
Mhm.
and Kevin was not someone who was a way he kind of got off scot free. Um,
Well, I mean,
which
Kevin
is,
is he likes younger girls. He said that, and it's been
yes,
proven. So, I
yes,
mean,
and I mean, like, he's gotten 15-year-old girls pregnant before,
mhm.
and he said this all stems from, which is the first I'm hearing of this in this whole thing, is that when he was 18, his
Oh
mother
yes.
sexually seduced him, which I have no idea. If I'm just going to base on everything else Kevin had said during this interview, that it's a lie. It very well could have happened, but I'm hesitant to give him the benefit of the doubt. But he says that's where all this stems from, is that he was sexually abused by his own mother while he was 18, which I don't know if there's any proof of this or if he's brought it up before,
Mhm.
but no one else has kind of mentioned. Do you think that would be brought up by people with Brockton? Like, oh yeah, Kevin, nice guy. Uh, I don't know. Maybe people didn't know about it, but it's very, very.
Mhm. Well, he said it was when he met his mother again. They had been
Yes.
not yeah. He met her again for like the second time at age 18.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just very, very strange. I also kind of think that might have been him trying to, like, as weird as this sounds, like him humbly brag, be like, even my mother wanted to fuck me, because he says on multiple occasions, he'll be like, oh, all these different girls, all they want to do is have sex with me, and I protect them, It doesn't matter like how young they are. It's just I protect them, and everyone in South Carolina, Brockton, upstate New York has always just been clamoring after him, which I I don't think is the truth when it comes down to it. So yeah, I just found that just a strange thing to just kind of throw out there, be like, yeah, my mother, tried to seduce me when I was 18.
I think another interesting portion was he was talking about more about his relationship with Dixie Sin, Keisha Smith. And we heard a lot about Keisha not really caring about Faith. When we heard her in episode 2, we heard that she misses her. She's her sister. And Kevin said when he was with Keisha, like he wasn't allowed to talk about Faith. She didn't want to hear anything about her.
Which I think if I go back to that episode, because what I like to do is I like when a new episode comes out, I'll listen to that episode, then I'll start back at episode 1 and kind of re-listen to see if there's anything else I caught. And I believe Kirk at one point was saying when he interviewed Keisha, he doesn't think she was telling necessarily the truth, but she also doesn't think she was lying. He thinks that she was telling kind of half truths. So the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Once again, I'm just going to say, based on Kevin just flat out lying during the entirety of this interview, I'm just going to say that anything he said, just believe the opposite. So I'm sure Keisha was very close with Faith and all that other stuff. But there was one last thing that was brought up near the end of the episode. So Kevin says that he reaches out to these victims' families and friends to see how they're doing, which is just, once again, it's just like a superhero complex. Like what can I do for you? I know you've been through so much, and it's like, probably you can get the fuck away from me, or you can go to jail, kill yourself is probably what they want to say. But Kirk goes like, so what do you think Yvette like? And Kevin goes, Yvette's very mean to me. And it's just very like, yeah, like how do you expect her to react when you're a suspect in her sister's disappearance 30 years ago? It's just something that, and he was like, well, she's mean to me, she doesn't believe the truth and all these other things. And it's like, well, give her a reason to believe you. If you came to her and said, hey, look, what would have been, not necessarily I'm saying she would have felt this way, but if you said, hey, look, I just passed this polygraph test with all these different things, this points towards someone else, I gave some information about someone else. It's very, it's just, you've had many opportunities to do this.
He's reaching out to these people to kind of make himself look like that protector again that he thinks he is. But you would think if he's a prime suspect in doing these, like, wouldn't you want to distance yourself from, like, I don't know, it's like it's I don't know. It's weird that he would reach out and make himself more a part of it if he wants to distance himself. Like, he should want to distance himself.
It just seems very like, oh, look, if I killed this girl, would I have been reaching out to her sister or to her
Which
family and friends?
I think yes, you would, because it looks like you're covering your bases.
Yes, so anyway, that's kind of how the episode ends. And I thought it was great. I think it was just Kirk at his best. He had some quips in there. Kevin is just the biggest liar. I know I said maybe it was a couple wrap-ups ago, that I think that the Natalies had a lot to do with Jennifer's death. I mean, after listening to this episode, you can't think anything other than Boston was also heavily involved with all this. All he had to do was take a polygraph, And even if he took a normal polygraph and things came out inconclusive, it would have looked a hell of a lot better than falling asleep. It's literally like breaking your leg so you don't have to run the mile in gym class. It's absolutely insane. So
One thing we didn't mention. One thing we didn't mention. On the Natalis, he has maintained that they are somehow responsible for Jennifer Faye's death. And he says he hates Rich Natali. But if we go back to his brother in New York, he says that Kevin was best friends with Rich Natali.
Yes.
So
which has been, many people have backed that up. They said, and then I think at one point he was like, "Oh, there was a falling out because they tried to have him kidnapped or something like that." And Kirk asked, "Was this before or after the Jennifer disappearance?" And he's like, "I don't remember," which is something you would probably remember. If certain things happen in your life, I think trying to get kidnapped and the disappearance of someone of whom you are considered a suspect for would be two major things. So, anything else you want to say before we wrap this show up?
The only thing, if you want to go to the Reddit, the subreddit, case subreddit, that's always interesting to read.
Yes.
And if you want to listen to the 2010 interrogation that is on the case YouTube.
Yes, it is on this, whatever, wherever you're watching this. If you just click on the channel, it is available here. Thanks, Harrison. This was a good one.
Thank you.
I can't wait for next week. I mean, things are. I mean, there's only 3 episodes left. I feel like there's a lot to talk about. I feel like he keeps saying, we'll talk about this person in a later episode. In regards to another suspect or whatever.
It's always changing. This was supposed to be episode 7, Kirk said.
Yes. So, I mean, does that mean, that there's going to be another 2 episodes? I could definitely see this kind of being, an 8-episode series, and then them kind of having an epilogue, maybe a month or 2 down the line when things kind of settle, and you see what happens to this in regards to
comes out,
in regards to this. But thanks for doing this, Harrison, and I will talk to you guys all next week.